Well, in less than a month, Saskatchewan's finance minister will deliver the government's budget. How much progress will he make reducing that $1.2 billion deficit? How much should he make? Murray Mandryk is political columnist with the Regina Leader-Post, and he joins me now. Good morning.
It's going to be a long, long month, isn't it?
It really is, and probably more so for the politicians than for us. Do you think leading up to this?
No, I'm not sure about
us?
that. I'm not sure about that.
It has seemed a bit frenetic lately, from talking about unpaid days off or holidays to wage rollbacks, layoffs, scrapping tax exemptions. Where do you think we're at as we approach this budget?
Well, it's more typical than we think, Stephanie, because as you know, it's Brad Wall throwing everything against the wall and seeing what sticks the best. And the latest in terms of what sticks the best is, well, maybe we don't need to balance the budget in this year at all. Maybe we can do it in 2 years, 3 years. And that idea is actually coming from a former finance minister, a former Sask Party finance minister, their very first finance minister in Rod Ganefort, who ironically was the guy that presented the Balanced Budget Act that said, no, you can't run consecutive deficits. This would be the third deficit in a row. But now Mr. Ganefort, when asked by our newspaper, and I'm not so sure this was as coincidental as it seems, but when asked, he said, well, it's going to be too painful to basically try and balance the budget in 1 year, given all the changes. I think that's a great message for Premier Brad Wall. I also think it's one of those times when it's a great message and throwing something else against the wall that actually does make sense.
How much likelihood was there that they'd even be trying to balance this in 1 year, given that the finance minister, Kevin Doherty, has said that would be hard to do, very hard to do, in fact.
Well, just think about all the rhetoric that they've been throwing at us. He's saying that would be very hard to do, but they've also been saying, both Mr. Doherty and Mr. Wall, let's not do anything crazy. And the crazy stuff is some of the stuff that we've been talking about because it's all been thrown against the wall and see what fits. I think they are going to do a lot of things in smaller doses than maybe we imagined. If, for instance, they have the holidays, the forced days off, I think they'll implement it in a more of a hopefully they'll do this anyway. They'll implement it in more of a sound way that doesn't exactly break public sector contracts, that doesn't affect the delivery of things like health and education services. If they're going to increase taxes, they'll probably do it from a broadened PST perspective as opposed to a 1% or 1 percentage point increase in the PST to 6% that would hurt everybody. There's lots of room in terms of the broadening of the PST, but that doesn't necessarily get you there as quickly as Mr. Wall has been hinting he wants to get there. We want to do this in 1 year. We want to fix everything that took how many years to get to in terms of this mess. I think basically that it's going to be a combination of many of these things that's going to accumulate in the notion of having another deficit budget. How large, I don't know, but I think they'll come in and here's our budget, here's our plan to stick with it for another 2 years, and maybe next year or the year after we'll actually present a balanced budget as many other jurisdictions in Canada are now doing. Which
we'll be hearing about as well. What do you think would be an acceptable deficit to forecast in this budget?
Well, given that they set the bar pretty high at $1.2 billion, acceptable after that is anything less. But I think something in the neighborhood of $500,000 or less.
Half a billion, like 500 million?
Billion or less. If they actually get to that point and get down to a couple hundred, that's bragging rights anyway for them. And it's not as difficult as it might seem if you think about what the deficit's made of. It's made up of a lot of capital expenditures that can be eliminated. It's not the simplistic idea, gee, most of your wages come from civil servants, so let's just cut civil servants. That's not exactly how it works because that's your core service as government. But if you look at other things like the Workers' Compensation Board payout of $236 million, that's not necessarily something that's going to be on the table this year.
Right.
So you start eliminating some of those things and it gets down pretty quickly. And I think that there's an acceptable atmosphere to do that. Plus, I think they are going to do things in terms of major reorganization at the school board level, at the hospital level, that is going to save the money. There's tons of money to be saved in education if you really want to look at the link agreements and all the contracts. If you want to do it smartly, you can still save a lot of money. It's just going to take slightly longer.
Right. Remember in the wake of some of the real highs and lows of budgeting, including for former Finance Minister Rod Ganefort with a nearly $2 billion revenue hit due to potash, there was was a lot of talk about core budgeting to smooth out the bumps in the road from non-renewable resource prices. Whatever happened to that?
That is a good question, and I do not know the answer to that. I think it was one of the many things, like I say, that Brad Wall has traditionally thrown up against the wall and seen what sticks. In fairness, I think they do another version of core budgeting right now. They do set the idea that health is going to be this much, education is going to be this much, based on the salaries, et cetera. What they haven't done is taken a look at that core and said, can it be less? Can we hollow it out? And they certainly can in many areas, as they're now approving. Sometimes that's as painful as anything, and that's where we're getting into conversations like, do we really need the wallet aid? Can we really afford to have them come into? Can we ask them to take a day off without pay? In some cases, I think you can, and in some cases, you can work it right into the agreement. I'm sure there's a lot of civil servants and public sector workers nearing the end of their careers who would basically say, an extra day off a month, 12 more days a year for holidays, if I could bang them, if I could do other things, it would be a smart thing to do. But it's got to be done smartly. And to do it smartly, I guess you need more time.
How bad news budgety do you think this budget's going to be? Or is it going to be like many where we've heard so many scary things leading up to it that we'll have a huge sigh of relief?
Well, I think the latter, because that's Brad Wall's style. And you've seen it. When have you last heard him go to a SUMA conference and not present the worst, including last year before the election, where once again you weren't going to get your full top up in the municipal revenue sharing pool. People prepare for that. Well, of course they did, because they were going into an election. They were going to campaign on not doing that. Core budgeting, transformational change, whatever
everything's
the buzzword,
on the table.
Everything's on the table, except RMs.
Or MLAs.
Or MLAs. Well, I think that's actually going to be on the table. They'll have no choice of that, or they'll be on the steps with scythes and pitchforks and torches.
I meant adding three more.
Oh, that, yes. Well, they're not going to eliminate those three, although they might eliminate one next week. But
we'll talk about the by-election next week. How about I'll be back with you, and Sheila will be back, and we'll get the results next Thursday, right?
Okay.
Meewasin.
We'll be back with the 10 missed calls.
Thanks.
You're welcome.